Welcome to Leadership Live podcast, and I'm very excited to be hosting Daniel Levitats today, a very special guest that we also have a couple of things in common, so I'm excited to look at those. But let's start with a bit of a bio, but let me just quickly say a warm welcome to you, Daniel. Welcome.
Thank you, Daphna, for this opportunity to share some thoughts and life experience. Yes. And like you said, I do think we have a lot of things in common that will probably come up during our nice chat today.
For sure. I look forward to it. And I know I've certainly been inspired, and I'm looking forward to our audience being inspired as well. So Daniel Levitats is a man who sets high bars and keeps raising them. He's no stranger to the high-tech world, with 16 years under his belt, driving business transformation, process change, and implementing foundations for accelerated growth in fast-growing NASDAQ-traded companies. He then made a shift about 10 years ago into the medical device and biotech space, where he joined founders of a biotech startup, Datum Dental, to help it grow commercially, and continued as CEO post-acquisition, leading the business into high double-digit growth, doubling the team in Israel, and building a new facility to serve this highly successful company for many years ahead. He's a father of four, plays piano, a big fan of Billy Joel, just for some fun facts. And we have two things in common. We share a passion for running. Daniel's a marathon runner. And also we both climbed Kilimanjaro. So that's very exciting. And hopefully you'll get to talk about that too. But Daniel, as we start this conversation, I really want you to take us, because I know you've been through a lot of challenging times, and your whole approach of use the challenges and use change to your advantage and make the most out of it. So let's dive into the COVID era, where I think a lot of companies were experiencing a lot of challenging situations. And you had one of those where you had to put 30% of your staff on furlough. But I loved your approach in terms of how you came out of it, which is doing the opposite of what everyone else in the market was doing. So tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, so I think, tough times bring, a lot of leaders to a situation where they need to bring together a lot of capabilities. And you never know if you're going to be making the right decisions. You're taking a lot of risks. But I think that sometimes you need to take risks, especially in tough times, in order to try and get out of them. So what we had at that time, this was the beginning of 2020 and COVID hits. We're a company selling products to the dental industry, and obviously the dental industry was hit very, very hard. Q2 sales were down 80%. Other industries were hit 10%, 20%, 30%. We were down 80% because basically, besides emergency treatments, nobody was accepting people into dental clinics. There were no protocols how to take care of the patient safely and how to take care of the staff safely.
So everyone was staying home, simply put.
So everybody was staying home. And now we also were in a situation where we started getting canceled orders, and now there's no income for the company, and really no outlook, when all of this is going to end. And we had to reduce costs dramatically. So obviously we put on furlough about 35% of the employees, which was a tough decision, especially since we had no idea if we're going to be able to bring them back 3-4 months later. And we cut costs in almost all areas of the organization, including obviously operations, R&D, and quality, and so forth. And since at that time I was the commercial leader of the company, responsible for marketing and sales and other clinical relationships with key opinion leaders, I felt this responsibility to try and find ways to generate some type of income sometime along the line, because we're not just going to sit around and just wait for this tough wave to go by, because if we would have done that, potentially we wouldn't have been able to bring our head above the water at some stage.
Right.
And there were a couple of things that were very obvious. It was obvious that clinicians were closing their clinics. They didn't have income. They were paying their staff. They were paying the rent. But some of them were available to actually deliver messages to the world and maybe gain a little bit of income. On the other hand, there were clinicians that were available to listen to people. Okay, today it sounds, when you say webinars today, it sounds like it's
normal. Exactly.
Yeah, normal, or people just want more of the face-to-face. But at that time, it wasn't very, very common. Now, as opposed to what was happening in the market, and I was talking to clinicians, I was talking, with partners of ours, everybody was putting marketing spend down to zero.
Right, and exactly. That was seen as a luxury almost, that you don't spend on marketing when your income is down and everything looks really dire. How do you put more money into marketing when people are also staying at home because they're just very fearful of going out or going to the clinic? So yeah, it's a really, really good question.
So I was having conversations with business partners that sold our products around the world, and all of them just basically shut down almost all their channels.
Yeah.
And we decided actually to do the opposite. We decided to try and increase exposure of our brand at that time. And we started to do massive amount of clinical education online. Now, when you're doing clinical education online, you need somebody to deliver the content, and you need people that are going to listen.
Right.
Okay. Now, it's not going to generate dollars for the company at that point in time. It's just an investment. And at that time, as a company, we were producing maybe 1 or 2 international, clinical education events. It was always a big thing, and it would take us months to get ready for. And our marketing team needs to promote it and, do campaigns. So it wasn't a big part of what we were doing. And I felt that we have to do this at a very high pace, even if it's not perfect. And this is one of the things when you're at crisis mode, you don't have the privilege for perfect. You need to sometimes do trial and error and, in an agile form, do things, figure out what went well, what went not so well, improve for the next time, and keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I got my team together. It wasn't easy. The dynamics with the team obviously was, we can't do this. You're asking for 3, 4, 6 webinars in 1 month. How are we going to do this? The website is not ready. We don't have time to promote. You have a lot of challenges, and everybody's in general dealing with what they have at home with COVID. Everybody's very stressed out. Everything's being done remotely. But there was a certain point where the team kind of gathered together and said, okay, everybody understood that we're in crisis and we need to do something. So at the end of the day, I think the whole team came together and we worked very well together to deliver a very aggressive program that actually evolved over time. We made some decisions. We said, okay, we're going to do 3, 4 international webinars. And it turned into, 7 in April of 2020. Because we saw it went well.
That's very quick moving, right? Because March was when it hit full on. And then there were all the closures, I think, even towards the end of March. And you were already rolling out these webinars at that level in April. Really, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was quite.
It's quick turnaround.
It was quite intense. And the first webinar we did, and I won't forget that date, March 27, when I was actually calling up Zoom to increase my license because I knew that I'm seeing more and more registrations. We were used to 200, 300 people registering, and suddenly we get to over 1,500 people. Now, that's a number that, you're never going to get such exposure, even if you go to the biggest dental conference and spend 3 days there and pick up some business cards.
Amazing.
So for several key months, I would say end of March, April, and May, we were all over this channel. And the doctors, the clinicians, the doctors that were delivering the content, the clinicians who were listening, our business partners around the world felt that we were really making a huge investment.
Amazing.
To save the business on one hand, and they appreciated that, and they wanted to collaborate with that. And on the other hand, we were creating huge global exposure and demand for our brand, while the competition was like sleeping their winter sleep like big bears. And we were hearing this from everybody. They were saying, hey guys, what are you at Datum Dental doing? I mean, everybody's asleep, not doing anything, and you guys are like all over the place. You must be a huge company, and we were doing all of what I was describing. with maybe 4 or 5 employees. So it was quite amazing, and we got exposure in so many countries around the world that our business was relatively small. And we continued with that, and even did global business partner gatherings virtually in the month of June. We really developed a strong muscle of how to do high quality international events.
Amazing. Yeah, because with every one of them, you just improve. You see as you said, it's an iterative process. So what worked, what didn't work, improve on what didn't work, and keep going.
Yeah, and you need to balance that with what is the right frequency of things.
Right.
But the thing was that the impact of this was only apparent several months later, as markets started to get back to action. Suddenly, in certain countries where we got to a huge audience, suddenly demand went skyrocketing. And actually, we ended that year in high double-digit growth in a market that was declining throughout 2020, wow. which was acceptable. A lot of companies in this market were not even showing were not usually discussing their 2020 results too much. They would usually compare 2021 to 2019 because 2020 doesn't count, it doesn't represent anything. And we were actually very proud of what we managed to achieve. And actually, by July of that year, we brought back every one of those employees that was on furlough.
Amazing.
And I remember that moment, for several months, that everything was very high tension, that suddenly you see the employees coming back. And the company is continuing to operate, and the smiles are coming back to people's faces. I think it created a substantial turnaround for the company.
Sure. What an amazing story. And Daniel, some real gems for people to take out of it. And for me, the first thing is that do the opposite. When the whole market is doing one thing, find that place where you can do something different. Do the opposite. Go against what everyone's doing, because that's your only opportunity to actually leverage off some gap that you might be able to find. And you just did it. And the speed with which you did it is also really, really inspiring. I also love how you approach the whole idea of, yes, it was going to be a big expense to now roll out these webinars and educate the public, but you saw it as an investment rather than an expense. And this was an investment that you would have to continue to put in over months until you saw the impact and the return, even though there was already indications, because already you were setting yourself in a different place compared to the market. So gaining exposure, becoming known, people seeking you out for collaboration, orders really increasing then when the market came back. So just amazing. And I also want to highlight the one point that you said, that even if it's not perfect, such an important learning, because I think sometimes people get stuck on the detail of wanting to make it perfect before it rolls out. And I think that can hold people back and businesses back a lot.
That was one of the biggest challenges, with the team and my colleagues and the management team.
Right.
You want to get it right. And sometimes getting it right means that you might be pushing something out for a long time and you're not going to be doing it. And here, time was of the essence. And I must say, for me, forget about my team. For me, it was difficult because personally, I strive for very high quality of deliverables.
Right.
But, if you, at the end of the day, don't do anything and you miss the train, then it's not worthwhile, whatever deliverable you think you're working on. If it's not there on time.
Exactly. So that's also, a question that I have for you is, you spoke about the team and, everybody wanting to get it right, and even your own, mindset of needing to get something right and almost perfect before it rolls out. How did you bring the team together in that challenging situation where I'm sure there were some voices that were saying, no, don't do it. It won't work. We can't, as you said we can't set it up in such an amount of time. There isn't time. The website's not ready. How did you bring the people together in this situation?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's not something that you build in one day or at that moment. It's a relationship that you've built with a lot of these people that you've brought on board or have been part of the team, and we've worked together on things. We know the mindset. But at the end of the day, I think that people were dedicated towards the cause of, first of all, creating a turnaround in the company. They understood that it's very important. Second of all, because of that gradual process that we did, and we accelerated as we went along, we did the first event. People saw success. And I always, I believe in those quick wins, because quick wins empower people.
Right. Quick wins.
When you wait for that final outcome, then, along the way, people need little motivators. And, people were also pretty dedicated, very dedicated towards the company, towards me in many ways. And I don't take that for granted. Yeah. And they understood that at the end of the day, we need to move together as one. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to bring any value. But the moment we got through, let's say, the first event, and it was an amazing success, suddenly the team is coming with ideas and how we should do it differently, and what should the next webinar look like, and which doctors should we reach out to, and how should we promote it next time, because suddenly it was possible and it was effective, and people felt they were making a difference. So I think those are the key points.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So it's the trust that's built. It's the relationship that takes time to build, so that when you hit crisis and challenge, your team's already behind you and willing to support you, even in crazy ideas that have to be implemented very quickly. And then seeing that initial success. I love that. Like, small successes are also important to get the motivation going and get some energy going in a time when people were feeling very demotivated and very unsure of what's going to be and how long it's going to take.
One more thing, I think, and it might come up further along the line in our conversation. I was part of the team. I wasn't just, there trying to make decisions, trying to give guidance or tasks out to people. I was part of the team. Every time we did activities, I was there, and I was taking some of the tasks upon myself, because we weren't a huge team.
Yeah.
But people felt that we were in it together, and therefore the level of the dedication was quite amazing.
Amazing, just amazing. So I love how, I know there's lots of stories in your life of challenge and triumph and difficulty and all of that. And I know that you've kind of created or distilled it into some key lessons, and I love your lessons. So I'd like to go through those. And I know we talked about 5 lessons. So let's talk about them. What are your key lessons? And the first one you pointed out to me is about using change to your advantage. So taking change and challenge and using it to your advantage. And this means being bold and taking risks. So maybe tell us a bit about that. And I think what the story we discussed is an example of this, but maybe there's something else that you can share.
I think there's a lot. It's in a way a way of life for me in many ways. Usually people, the basic instinct of us humans is that we don't like change. We like comfort.
Right. Yeah. We avoid change as much as possible. But there's a change threshold, right? There's change. We like a little bit of change because we do like variety and we do like to try new things. But there is a change threshold over which we say, no, don't want. We want to keep us safe, right? We want to keep us still within the familiar and the known.
The threshold is different also for different people.
Yes, for sure.
But I believe that as a basic instinct, most people are reluctant towards changes. Now, when you put that in a organizational environment, even if you look at research today, and it's like the same in nature, that species that will survive are those that are most adaptable to change. And I think that if you look at organizations that survived, that have longevity, if you look at companies today that are listed on NASDAQ or Dow Jones and where they were 50 years ago, how many of them were even existed? When you look at their story, at the end of the day, they went through massive changes throughout the years. They reinvented themselves at that level. And I think that within organizations, organizations that adapt change as part of their core values of the organization, they're going to have a company that grows faster, that is ahead of the competition, that really takes bold steps, as you mentioned, to be relevant, and therefore, I think that individuals and managers that are more adaptable to change, I think they'll also be more successful within the organizations that they operate. Now,
there's something about a culture of adaptability or taking on change or looking for change. I know I've certainly worked with companies where they don't sit still for a minute. As soon as they've done one launch of some change to the product or whatever it is, they're already looking for what's going to be the next change that we can. It's almost keeping ahead of the curve of change.
Yeah, but it's sometimes when you talk about products and product innovation, sometimes that comes a little bit more trivial to organizations, because what we're supposed to do is create.
It's part of the program.
Yeah, but when you talk about processes or DNA of how the company operates, or you come to a manager that's been doing something for 15 years and it's worked, and now you say, hey, maybe we should consider doing it differently. And many of them will say, why should we even do it differently?
Right.
Or somebody came here 5 years ago and suggested it and it didn't work, so forget about it. You get a lot of that. But I really believe in that. And if you, as an individual, turn that into part of your life at some level, everybody's different.
Right. Everyone's different.
Day and age, and we see how things are so dynamic around us, much more dynamic than what they were 10 or 15 years ago. If you don't embrace change sometimes, if you don't adapt to change, and if you don't push for change sometimes, you might become irrelevant at some point in time.
Yeah, 100%. I so agree with you. But you know what, Daniel, I want you to, if you don't mind, share the story of your childhood, because I think just from our previous conversations that maybe for you, this was instilled at a very young age when you had that. Yeah, well, you tell us the story.
It's, you never know what came first, but and what influences you. But yeah, as a child, I actually in kindergarten was the fastest runner in kindergarten. I remember it. And between kids, everybody's all the time in competition.
Right.
And then at the age of about 5.5, I got hit with this hip disease, which was relatively rare. I had it in both feet, and it creates a very, particularly for almost a year or so. I could not walk, I could not run for sure, and I was carried around. The end of the story is positive, because at the end of the day, I got through this. It's a disease called Perthes. It doesn't really exist today, but I think I was one of those rare cases where I met an amazing clinician who identified that I was at some healing phase after seeing 10,000 doctors. And I remember this as if it was like yesterday. Many of us don't remember things from that age. But my parents ran around taking me to all the best doctors, and he saw that I was in some healing phase, and my hip joints were regenerating. And I remember those x-rays until today. But I had to deal with a situation at such a young age that I was basically crippled for a certain period of time. And now I'm coming back to kindergarten, and all the kids are looking at me, and now they're stronger and faster than me. And I had to deal with that. And I think dealing with such challenges at such a young age, and still being able to also find the ways to keep busy, but also finding the ways to maintain your self-confidence and to meet these kind of challenges, I believe did have impact on a lot of things that I've done throughout my life. And even you mentioned in the beginning that that I've also done. I've done 2 marathons. That people have done many more than that. There are people that have done much more difficult things than that. But for me, when I did did my first marathon, it was just so emotional and so impactful because of where I had started. And I think it's given me an approach where everything is possible, and if we set goals, even if they're high, even if they're challenging for you and definitely for others, maybe. If you work hard enough and if you persist enough, you can overcome almost anything.
Amazing. That's the approach. Amazing. And I do think there might be a connection, because at that young age, you were all of a sudden taken off from even how you knew yourself, the fastest runner, in kindergarten, right. And then you can't even barely walk. There was something in you that decided you're not just accepting it. You're doing whatever you need to do. And I guess also kudos to your parents for taking this on and, going from doing whatever they needed to do. And that might even been a model for you in terms of how you approach challenge, and great outcome. So happy to hear that, medically this.
Another part of that story, I became a huge puzzle maker after that event. My parents in the 70s had to keep a 5.5-year-old active.
Yes.
How do you keep a 5.5-year-old active when he's sitting down all day long? And so one of the things was puzzles, and my parents started bringing me a lot of puzzles, and I was doing bigger and bigger puzzles. And when I look at puzzles today, I look at it, first of all, puzzles has a big picture. You see the whole picture.
Right.
And today I look at myself and my ability to see things at 30,000 feet and strategic. But at the end of the day, also in puzzles, there's a lot of detail. Lot of detail, and the ability to dive into the detail and then put the different pieces in place. Exactly. And I don't know what came first, but I do see a lot of things in the way that I operate today in that connection to that period of my life.
Amazing. And I think puzzles are a great metaphor for leadership and what leaders need to do, because they do need to keep the big picture in mind all the time. You can't do a puzzle without seeing the picture and what the end result looks like. You have to, sometimes as a leader, you have to imagine that picture. You don't have a concrete picture, but you need to imagine it somehow. And at the same time, make sure that all the details are working, that all the details are in place, and that you can have access to that level of detail, not necessarily doing it yourself, but making sure that those details are taken care of as well. So, excellent metaphor there as well. Okay, let's move on to lesson number 2, which was sticking to your core values. And here, you said it was about honesty and passion and dedication that are sometimes more important than skill. So just tell us something quick about that.
I totally believe in that, but at the end of the day, when you're in the business world, obviously you need to operate in certain ways, and there are certain rules and DNAs of organizations, and bigger organizations, corporates that have certain rules, and smaller organizations that are a little bit more flexible. That's true, and you need to be able to, again, to adapt to that. But at the end of the day, every one of us brings some core values to our work environment and to the way we manage and collaborate with the people around us. And I think I've stuck to that all along, and sometimes I've paid prices for that.
Yeah, okay. You do. Sometimes you pay a price for sticking to your values, because it might be easier to compromise, maybe honesty or, enthusiasm and passion, and just go along because you need to, or you're being told to by your superiors. It's a really tough conflict at times.
Yeah, and you need to be smart, because you need to work in sometimes in complex environments.
Right.
But I have done my best to stick to the values that I've that I've lived according to, and obviously I brought them from home and developed them over the years. If it's being very honest, being transparent about things, being respectful to others. And also putting all your energies and passion into what you're doing, okay? And I feel that sometimes your energy and passion towards things that you're doing and believing in the things that you're doing at work is a much more important trait than certain professional skills that someone may have. And that's also affected in many ways over the years, people that I've recruited, managers that I've worked with or got along with, at the end of the day, many times I've recruited people that might not fit the job description and check all the boxes. Okay? Because at the end of the day, once that's over with, we have to get into the real world and we have to deal with real problems. And if you are surrounded with people that you trust, people that trust in you, people that have the passion for the goal that we as a company are trying to drive, you're going to get people that are much more dedicated, that even when you get to the tough times, they're actually going to bring to the table more capabilities. And I think that at the end of the day creates organizations that are probably happier and people that are more effective. So just stick to your core values.
Yeah, I love that. I think for me, there's two things that I see there. One is culture fit. Sometimes you do get a superstar, coming to interview for a position and they're just not a culture fit. And what do? Do you hire them because their skills are so great, or do you not? Because that somewhere in the culture, there's not going to be a fit. And what you're saying is that it's so important to build the team from a culture fit perspective, because then you're building a team where you are going to have trust and you're going to have loyalty and dedication through tough times. And that is super important, because having someone who's a superstar in your team that doesn't fit to the values is going to either change your culture or not going to work, really, from my experience. So I think that's really just such an important point. And then I always say, my second point here is that I always say that you can teach certain skills, but you can't teach loyalty, dedication, commitment, passion, honesty. Those are much harder to teach. So that's interesting. Let's move on to lesson 3, which I also love. Stay close to the people in your organization, no matter what level you're at. And I think we touched on that with being able to see the bigger picture and remain in the detail. It's kind of knowing what's going on and not just either being so remote in your big picture vision or getting so stuck in the details that you're missing the big picture.
The more you go up the ladder, you think that you can stay only at the 30,000 feet and be strategic. And you need to manage your time wisely at the end of the day, because your responsibilities are big. But it's a fine line of how do you also give the people you're working with the feeling that you're with them in the same game and working together with them, and they're appreciated. So I really believe in pulling up sleeves a lot of times, and I even have a lot of joy and fun sometimes when there are these tasks and we're at a critical time and things are not coming together and the teams are a little bit stressed out. And I'm creating some of that stress, maybe even as a manager, because I've demanded certain things. Pull up your sleeves, be part of the team for a couple of hours. I think they'll appreciate that. And then
get stuck
everybody will be more powerful.
Yeah. Awesome. And I think that for me, the metaphor of climbing a mountain is very relevant here, because with a mountain, you can see the big picture, you can see where you're going and what the goal is, but you have to take step by step. The only way you're going to get to the top is through taking those steps. Okay. Lesson number 4, I absolutely love. This is about sharing knowledge. And I know you speak about the quote that knowledge is power, but only if it's shared. And the old way of thinking was the opposite. But here we are. Actually, today, you'll only be really strong if you share your knowledge. So I love that.
Maybe other managers will not agree with me. Or
I don't think it's relevant for today's world.
I'd like to cut out this part of the recording. But
no.
I really believe in that, because, in the past, to be strong in an organization, you need to build knowledge and have unique knowledge and unique capabilities that only you have. If you have that, you are secured in the organization, and you're the person that everybody's coming to, and everybody's
you're the big guru, right?
And you can't. Nobody can get rid of you at any stage because you're so critical. But I believe, especially with managers, if they share their knowledge, they will have better people on their team, stronger people on their team, more knowledgeable people on their team that then become more effective, deliver better deliverables. And if your team is performing better, you as a manager are, you'll get credit, you'll get the outcomes will come your way in a faster way. So there's benefit in that. And I really believe in that. And sometimes, I can have a schedule during the day and suddenly somebody asks me a question, and then I just walk in their room and we spend 20 minutes just sharing knowledge.
So
and
important.
People say, what? He just, changed the whole schedule of the day and he's late for another meeting or whatever. But I really believe that sharing that knowledge is, at the end of the day, also going to create that stronger bonding and dedication of the people towards the organization, but also we're just going to have smarter people that are delivering better deliverables. I totally believe in that.
Awesome. Okay, and our last lesson is about dreaming big and planting seeds. And I love how you say, if you don't plant the seeds, definitely nothing will grow. So
Yeah. So a lot of times people, that work with me say, "Oh, you asked me this, you asked me that, you asked," because your head is working, you think about all kinds of things, and sometimes you have this tendency to throw things out there to all kinds of people. And yeah, my expectation also as a manager is not that everything gets done and every seed turns now into a project and gets a budget. And you need focus. Obviously, you need focus. But this also goes back to, we started with change. If you don't place a seed about an idea, a direction today, and it might take time, but if you don't place that seed today, you're not gonna get the flower 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Right. And I've seen that time and time again. You place that seed. Yeah, it's in the back. It's in the back there. But people start talking about it, and then it comes up in another meeting. And over time, if that seed represents a good idea, a good direction, it will eventually become a reality. I totally believe in that. So, I say to managers, dream high. A lot of times people around me say that I'm a little bit in la la land because I'm dreaming all the time about things. I actually enjoy being there, but I like translating that into reality,
into action. Yeah,
into action. So yeah, dream high, plant many seeds. Some of them might not grow, but those seeds that you plant and that are good and that have good potential will eventually become great ideas and great implementations.
Yeah, I think it's really a fantastic lesson because actually, I think it comes back to what you were sharing about the story about COVID and taking on those webinars. That was planting seeds. It was an idea that you didn't know how it would pan out in the end, what the outcome would be. It required quite a lot of investment that was really under pressure in those times to actually spend on. And it was a seed that really paid off big time. And sometimes you didn't, as you say, some seeds won't grow. Some seeds will grow into something fantastic. Some seeds can grow and you can realize it was a mistake, but it's that way of thinking, of putting it out there, trying different things and being willing to.
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset. It really is a mindset. Exactly. And I think you've really got it. So I think this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, Daniel. And I actually have one more question for you, because what I started to do is to ask my previous guest to pose a question to my next guest without knowing who the next guest is. So here's the question from our previous guest, who was Michael Bungay Stanier, who's also just a wonderful, wonderful guest to have had on the show and really worth listening to that episode. And his question for you is, what has been the hardest lesson about leadership that you had to unlearn?
Good question.
Yes, it's not as a kind of tough question.
No, I think that with all the things that I've mentioned throughout this great conversation, I think that sometimes you also need to understand, how to choose your battles, and even though I always believe everything's possible. And like my late mom used to say, where there's a will, there's a way. We can do it. I'm also doing work with myself to say, okay, when to let go of certain things.
Right.
When to
Such
let
a
go,
good point.
because sometimes letting go will make it easier for you and will make it easier for others. Again, it depends how critical that topic is, but letting go of some things will, at the end of the day, allow you to do the others in a better way, maybe with a little bit less tension for you and the environment. And I think even though, it's I'm not in the beginning of my career, but it's one of those things that I hope that I'll be able to develop more and more as I go along, and strengthen that trait as much as I can.
I love that. I think that is so important, knowing what you need to let go of, knowing when to quit. Because I think, again, as leaders, visionary leaders, there's ideas and you want to implement and see your dreams come into a reality, and not all the dreams are going to work out, right? Not all of it. And knowing at what point, it's also not giving up too soon, not giving up too late, but at what point do you actually quit? Or at what point do you push on? And I think that is actually a really, really important lesson, and something leaders do need to unlearn, because there is a natural positivity and energy and vision that comes with this mindset. So lovely answer. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. So before we say goodbye, any final things you'd like to share? Anything maybe important that we haven't discussed in our conversation today?
I think leadership is an ongoing journey, and even though looking back, I talked about values that you bring from home, certain events in life that impact the way maybe I operate. Service in the military that might have influenced my managerial approach. As well as, like you said, piano playing, puzzle making, trekking, and running marathons. Everything impacts the way we look at things. But I think that leadership is a continuous learning process. Don't think that you know everything, and you need to continuously learn. There's new generations coming now into organizations. The way to work with them could be different. New technologies, new approaches. You have to be open-minded to slightly reinvent yourself once in a while so that you can continue to be a very positive and effective leader, in my mind.
Thank you, Daniel. So for people who would want to reach you, we'll put your LinkedIn, that's the best way to connect with you, and that will go in the show notes, and people can look you up and get in touch with you. And I really wish you good luck in whatever next venture you get involved in, because I know it's going to be exciting and it's going to be a success. So just thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Daphne. It was great.